Today I am going to continue a teaching that I started. I think the first part of it I gave back in May, and it is on the King of Aspiration prayers. But actually, it isn't on the whole prayer. Quite honestly, it would take a book to go through everything that is in this prayer. What I'm concentrating on is the very first part, and this part is also in green Tara. In our text that we use at the center, it is on page 3 to page 5. And in the previous teaching, I talked about homage and prostrations. And I also talked a little bit about the offerings. Maybe just for a way of introducing this, I'm just going to read the English translation that we have in our Green Tara text. With body, speech, and mind, I pay homage to all those lions of humanity, as many as there are without exception, who arise in the world of the 10 directions and the 3 times. Through the power of this aspiration to excellent conduct, may I see in my mind all the victors and bow to them with as many bodies as there are particles in all realms. On each particle, I imagine as many Buddhas as there are particles surrounded by bodhisattvas. In that way, I imagine the Dharmadhatu totally filled with victors. With all the sounds of inexhaustible oceans of song, I fully express the qualities of all the victors. I praise all the Sugatas. I offer those victors sacred flowers, holy garlands, symbols, ointments, the best of parasols, the finest lamps, and sacred incense. I offer to those victors sacred fabrics, the finest scents, heaps of medicinal powders, equal in size to Mount Meru, and particularly excellent realms. I also imagine presenting to those victors whatever offerings are unexcelled and vast. Through the power of faith and excellent conduct, I pay homage and present offerings to all the victors. I confess individually all harmful actions that I have done with body, speech, and mind under the power of attachment, aversion, and bewilderment. I rejoice in all the merit of all the victors of the 10 directions, of the bodhisattvas and pratyeka Buddhas, to those training and beyond training, and of all beings. I exhort all the lamps of the 10 directions who have attained passionless Buddhahood through the stages of awakening, all those protectors who turn the unsurpassable wheel of Dharma with palms fully joined. I request those wishing to demonstrate passing into nirvana to abide for as many kalpas as there are particles in all realms, for the benefit and happiness of all beings. I dedicate all virtue, however slight, I have accomplished, accumulated through homage, offerings, confession, rejoicing, exhortation, and requesting to awakening. So that is the prayer in its entirety. And so to continue from where I left off the last time, it was talking about these offerings. And so there are different kinds of offerings. I'm going to talk about or begin talking about unsurpassable offerings. And these are offerings that are given by great bodhisattvas. And so the verses, this might be a slightly different translation. I'm taking this teaching from a teaching that the Galwan Karmapa gave, and this was the translation that was used in that teaching. I also imagine offering to all victors that which is vast and unsurpassable. I offer and bow down to the victors with the power of faith in excellent conduct. So what this means is that Samantabhadra would emanate countless form bodies, and from each pore of these form bodies, plus his own body, he would emanate more bodies from their pores. And so this countless, immeasurable number of emanations would make offerings and fill the Dharmadhatu with these offerings. A highly realized bodhisattva is capable of doing this. This is why it's unsurpassable, because it's beyond the ability of ordinary human beings to do this. And this is due to the power of Samantabhadra's aspirations and the power of his samadhi. So we aspire to be able to do this. And we imagine that we are doing it here, even though we actually can't do it. But the aspiration is extremely important. And to be able to do this, not only with this aspiration, but also with great faith. So belief is very important, believing that we are actually doing this to the best of our ability. So offering and generosity is actually a very important part of faith. And there's tremendous benefit from doing, chanting this prayer and imagining that these are the offerings that we are offering. Here is a quote from the Karmapa. The intelligent may have little to give, but can increase their merit greatly by giving skillfully. If you never lose your spirit of generosity, you will never become impoverished. So the important thing is not to feel, oh, I have nothing to give or I have very little to give, that mentally emanated offerings are very important. And being able to give what we can give physically, skillfully, is very important. And as he said, you will never become impoverished as long as you have this spirit of generosity. And it is important to give to impoverished people too. It's very important to continue to give to people that are suffering, not just the three jewels. And he says that it's good to ask ourselves and examine, and that is, are we reluctant to give our best possessions, but have no problem giving away what we don't want anymore? And if that is the case, and this really is common, I've heard Rinpoche talk about this in the past too, that if we're reluctant to give our best possessions, it's an indication of stinginess. This doesn't mean reluctant to give away everything, but it is good to give away the things that we have some attachment to, rather than just giving what we don't want anymore. actually, on the way here to this temple where I'm giving this, I stopped by the Goodwill and I did give away things that I no longer wanted, but I really didn't consider it shall we say, a gift to the less fortunate. I looked at it as thank you for taking this stuff off my hands and not having to have it fill a landfill. But I'm also pleased that it will go and be reused or recycled. So also when we're giving things, whether it be as an offering to the three jewels or to ordinary beings, it's important to look at the appropriateness of the gift. That obviously you do not give alcohol to an alcoholic. And when you're giving to the three jewels, it's important to consider, is this something that they will find useful in some way or another? At a previous teaching that I gave recently, the question came up, what about giving away one of my pet animals? And so you might be very attached to that pet, but then what is the recipient of that offering going to do with that animal? Because there's really quite an obligation here to take care of that animal until the animal dies. And so we need to consider that too in terms of when we are offering and making gifts. And Karmapa mentions 5 wrong ways or incorrect ways that lay people acquire offerings. And this is standard. And the first is selling animals or sentient beings in general. So if you're making money by selling animals, that's considered inappropriate. The second is making money by selling meat. The last 3 are selling weapons, poison, and alcohol. I would add on there, this is my own addition, illicit drugs. So these next 4 lines are further in this aspiration prayer, the King of Aspiration Prayers, and is not in this beginning part that I read, but it is as far as the ends of space, as far as to the ends of sentient beings, until the end of karma and afflictions. Thus far are the ends of my aspiration prayers. So this is an indication of the vastness of a bodhisattva's aspiration, that the aspiration is limitless in terms of time, it's limitless in terms of space, and it's limitless in terms of sentient beings. And a bodhisattva can make that aspiration. And this is one reason why this is called the King of Aspiration Prayers, because it has aspirations like that throughout it. And this is a form of generosity, this aspiration. And the source of this aspiration is actually the spontaneous compassion that is present in the minds of bodhisattvas. It's not something that they have to work on developing. We ordinary beings need to work on, you might say, bringing this quality, which is in its seed stage within our minds, to fruition. Karmapa points out that compassion and wisdom, they're kind of a unity, they're inseparable, and wisdom can be understood as the best of minds, and compassion is the supreme of hearts. And that by practicing them together, then we travel towards enlightenment. And compassion, he feels, is more important than wisdom. But it is the wisdom that will help us determine what is an appropriate gift and what is an appropriate offering. So he says that since compassion is indispensable, that it is essential that we give up violence and cease harming others. And he says this does not just simply mean refrain from physically or verbally assaulting others, but it includes all the sources that lead to these kinds of actions. So this includes then the mental state of anger, of hatred, jealousy, resentment, and greed. So it's important to look at our minds and see if any of these are present and do what we can to remove them if we do see them. Karmapa then says that we need inner peace and we need a sense of comfort within ourselves. But now in the 21st century, that our lifestyles, and he's talking throughout the globe, is busier and busier and busier. And quite honestly, my own observation is that being busy and speedy can easily lead to anger. Road rage is a very good example of that. I'm in a hurry, get out of my way. That kind of thing, but it can happen at work. It can happen at home, in a domestic situation. It can happen in a checkout line at a grocery store. It can happen when you're on the internet and whatever it is you're doing is taking too long, whether it be the download speed or the different steps you have to go through to order something online or whatever. That just being in a hurry, then when a speed bump arises, we get impatient, we get irritated, and it can quickly lead to anger. So that completes the section on offering. The next one is confession, and this leads right into confession because as we see these negative actions of body, speech, and mind arising, we need to purify them. And so this is the purpose of confession. And so the process starts with admitting that we did it, that we saw it arise and we're aware of it. It's especially important to confess any violations of our vows. And a sense of regret is really important. Now, this confession, it is short here. It's just 4 lines, and I'll repeat it here. Under the influence of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I have committed wrongs using my body, speech, and also mind. I confess each and every one of them. Now, of course, we can't remember everything negative that we have done in our present life, much less past lives. The basis of all of this is, of course, taking that which is not a self to be a self, and that which is not other to be an other. That Karmapa says this is the boss, and everything else arises due to that. All the different afflictive states of mind that arise from that basic ignorance, he refers to them as henchmen. Our pride, our jealousy, our anger, our attachment, and so forth, that these are the henchmen. So besides these actions, we're also confessing things that we have not done, but encourage others to do. Or maybe we participated, encouraged, and then went along with it. And then finally, there is rejoicing and being happy in the wrongdoing of others. So let's say, hypothetically, there's somebody out there that you have anger towards, and something bad happens to them. Then rejoicing in that negative experience, that is considered negative actions too. Or if somebody else does something harmful to that person. So this is also considered creating negative karma and needs to be confessed. But we also include all sentient beings in a confession. And we imagine that we're confessing for them as well. But Karmapa says, don't dwell on the faults of others. So, quote, we need to reach the point where we see our afflictions as utterly revolting and feel almost nauseous when we see them arising. This is a very important point, that these afflictive states of mind, jealousy, pride, anger, attachment, and indifference are normal. And it's easy for us to see them as normal. We might say, yeah, this is wrong and that is wrong. In the meanwhile, you might say we're missing the forest by seeing certain trees. That this is why there's so much suffering in samsara, because this is so normal, it's so common. And we don't have to be trained to do this. We don't have to be brought up in a certain culture or a certain family for these to become normal. They are just part and parcel of the human psychology in Buddhism. So the solution with confessions is to rely on the four powers. And he feels regret is the most important one. So I will go over these. Regret is seeing an action and developing strong regret that you have done it, that you feel you've harmed yourself, you've harmed others. If you harm another person, you've already harmed yourself. The next one that is just ranked second is the resolve not to repeat it. And so these are the two main ones. The last two are support and then remedial action. And these, he feels, tend to arise naturally if you have the regret and the resolve present. So support includes going for refuge and generating bodhicitta, having faith in the three jewels, having faith in Gyalwang Karmapa, faith in the teachings, and so forth. And then generating our aspiration to free all sentient beings from samsara and do what is necessary to be able to do that. So he covers an interesting, I've not run into this before, but he speculates that, so we've made this resolve to not do this action again, and now we find that we've done it again. Now, is that lying? And he said it could be, but it's not if you have this sincere wish to refrain from it. So that's an important point, this sincere resolve. If we have this sincere resolve, then it's not lying. And so, again, he talked about regret. I mentioned that in the beginning of this particular section here, that regret for our misdeeds is crucial. Quote, however, if we allow ourselves to wallow in guilt and cling to a self-image of ourselves as wholly faulty in this life or in the next, this is extremely harmful and clearly not the point of confession practice. So this is a very important point, that it is just more confusion, more obscurations and obstacles when we wallow in guilt and look at ourselves as being wholly faulty. That what we are doing is, with the confession, removing temporary stains. We're actually, you might say, building a fence between the past and the present so that there is room to grow and transform in the future. So we're born with a lot of karma from our past lives, strong habitual patterns. Just recognizing the difference between right and wrong is already a wonderful step in the right direction. So this is an important point. And I am going to add this because I was just listening this morning to a talk by Tai Situ Rinpoche called Guru Padmasambhava's Prophecies. This is on YouTube. It's a talk that he gave earlier, I think it was in June. And at the very end, he started talking about loving yourself. This was just, you might say, a total divergence from what the talk was about. But about the last 5 minutes, he talked about how important it is that if you don't have compassion for yourself, there's no way you can really have compassion for other beings. And if you don't have love for yourself, there's no way you can love other beings. That we need to learn how to truly love ourselves and how to truly have compassion for ourselves. And so things that you can do, and this is outside of formal practice, But from time to time, contemplate things that you have done that have been beneficial, that have been helpful. Contemplate that you've taken refuge or taken bodhisattva vows, and that you are connected with the teachings, with Gyalwang Karmapa, and so on and so forth. Instead of thinking all day long about all the bad things that you have done. It's good in the evening before you go to bed to look at what you have done during the day. And if you didn't accomplish everything that you had wanted, at least realize that you did accomplish something. And you might say, give yourself a pat on the back, make aspirations to do better if you see that you have engaged in negative actions of body, speech, and mind, and so forth. So there is a huge difference between self-indulgence and nurturing, guilt and remorse. So we need to be very much aware of these things and try to avoid self-indulgence and avoid guilt and other negative emotions towards ourselves. The next 4 lines are about rejoicing. Quote, I rejoice in everyone's merit, the victorious ones of the 10 directions, the bodhisattvas, the pratyeka Buddhas, those in training, those beyond training, and all beings. So these exceptional beings have, from the beginningless beginning to the present, accumulated huge amounts of merit. And so the victorious ones of the 10 directions are the Buddhas. And then we have all the bodhisattvas. Pratyeka Buddhas are beings, they're called solitary realizers, that in previous lifetimes, they've had a strong connection to teachers and the teachings and practice. And now they have been born in their present life where they have a strong revulsion for samsara, and they have a strong desire for solitude and to attain hinayana nirvana, which is peace. It's not the full Buddhahood, but they have accumulated tremendous amounts of merit. Those in training are people on the bodhisattva path, or any path actually, but the Mahayana path is really a path of training in the 6 perfections. Those beyond training are arhats, and that is beings that have attained this high state of the Hinayana path, where there is this conquering of the afflictive states of mind and even a sense of no self, but they do not see the selflessness of other and of outer phenomena. So, and then all beings is everybody else. And this means a huge amount of merit. It's vast. And the merit of ordinary beings is much greater than might be, that we might be aware of at the time, that it's easy to miss it, that beings are constantly doing things that are beneficial. It's just that what sticks in our mind is all the negativity that is going on, and that's what's in the news and so on, and it's easy to miss it. But it's really good to, not when you're doing the prayer, but at other times when you've got some free time to contemplate the merit of each of these categories and how much it is that has been accumulated from the beginningless beginning, and realize what a tremendous amount that we're dedicating, or excuse me, rejoicing. And rejoicing in the merit of others is the antidote to jealousy. The next is requesting to teach. So I request the protectors, the lamps of worlds of the 10 directions, who passing through the stages of awakening attain to Buddhahood beyond attachment, to turn the unsurpassable Dharma wheel. So if a Buddha appears and no one wants teachings, the Buddha will go elsewhere. And so we also need to be interested in the Buddha's teachings that are written down, and especially those that are given by a living teacher. That oral instructions are very, very important. That a book will not tell you if you've misunderstood something or missed something, but an actual teacher will do that. So you might say by inference that this is talking about requesting teachings and being interested in teachings from Karmapa, Taisitu Rinpoche, Krangu Rinpoche, Kempo Karta Rinpoche, at least what is written down and recorded in video, and then the lamas in general. This is something that I have observed at my center, is that sometimes very few people would come, and then after we were done doing the chanting or the meditation and there was time for teaching, people would say, well, I'm busy, I've got to go and do this and do that. And one person was left, and that person said to me, well, there's no point in giving teaching just to me. And that person left. And this produces a huge amount of negative habitual patterns and karma that will be a huge obstacle in future lives. You want to be hungry for the teachings. So I will recount the story that Rinpoche gave. And this occurred at the time of the Buddha. So there was one woman that was a maid of a noble woman, probably a queen. And the Buddha came to this area, and the maid really wanted to attend the Buddha's teachings. And the queen and the king, of course, went to the teachings. And the maid went with the queen. And when they got there, the queen said, well, I forgot something. Can you go back and get this for me? And so meanwhile, the Buddha started giving his teachings. The maid went back quickly, came back, and then the queen told the maid, go back and get something else. And by that time, when she came back, the teaching was over with. And but she had this very, very strong aspiration to attend the Buddha's teachings. And the story Rinpoche said then that this maid eventually died, but she was reborn as a princess, a queen, in a land that did not have Dharma. And as a result of her position, she did invite students of the Buddha to come and teach. And she introduced Buddhism then to the land that she was queen of. And then when she passed from that life, she was born in Dewa Chen. And this was a result of this aspiration. So aspirations are very important. I'm going to quickly go through the last and then open it up to questions. So the next is the request to remain. And I supplicate with my palms joined together those who intend to demonstrate nirvana, to remain for kalpas as numerous as atoms in the realms, for the welfare and happiness of all beings. So we need this strong desire for the teachings and for the Buddhas, the realized masters, the lamas, and so forth. We need to have this strong desire and to reinforce it by this branch of the 7-branch prayer, this requesting that these teachers and the Buddhas remain. And so all of these branches are building positive qualities. The last is the dedication. And it is, I dedicate whatever slight virtue is accumulated through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and supplicating to enlightenment. The best dedication is done where there is no person doing the dedication, no one being dedicated to, and there's no dedication. This can only be done by a bodhisattva who has realized emptiness, where there is not this separation. The rest of us, we do the best that we can